Oh, hi
Oh,
there.
oh, hey, Alex. Man, do I've got a bone to pick with you.
Oh, man.
It has been 2 weeks since we have discussed a book. It is about time we get down to it.
All right. And with that solid dad joke entry, welcome to this week's episode of the 800's. I am your co host, Alex, and you just heard from my lovely co host, Adam. And why don't we just jump straight into the plugs from there, skipping out on Alan because who needs to acknowledge the tech guy? We do. Thanks for everything you do, man.
If you joined us for the few minutes before the show, you heard Fearless First by Incompetech. We love Incompetech. You should check them out because they're cool and have cool sounds. That's filmmusic.io. Oh, wow. I thought I knew it by heart. Incompetech.filmmusic.io. We also have a Patreon page. You should check that out too because that's how we do votes for books and stuff and how we keep lights on and other things that cost money. So check our Patreon out and vote for what book we should read next. And last but not least, I'd like to talk to you about YouTube. YouTube is a cool video sharing website that allows you to upload videos such as the one we are making tonight and other videos like, say, a podcast about D&D and, get people to watch them and get likes and subscribers and stuff like that. So if you want to check out our YouTube page, the link is below the video.
All right, so this week on the 800s, we will be discussing our second book in our series celebrating Latinx authors, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. We begin on the island of Ucumil off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Here our heroine, Cassiopeia, is forced to toil for her bitter grandfather and endure the sour bigotry of her cousin. Cassiopeia yearns for more in her life when one day, in a fit of defiance and frustration, she opens a trunk in search of gold, and instead she finds herself bound by a thumb bone to a god of death.
If this is your first time joining us tonight, I'll give you the quick rundown. Alex or I will pitch a topic for conversation. Feel free to comment on your thoughts on the topic or question. As well, if you have a question or topic of your own that you want to discuss, pop that into the chat. We love pulling questions or conversations from the chat and talking about those. Really makes it feel more like a group effort instead of a partnership. So otherwise, we'll pitch some things back and forth and we'll chat and have a good time.
All right. And a quick reminder that this is not intended to be a kid show. We do veer towards the adult audience. We try not to swear too much, but we do cover adult topics and some swearing is to be had. So let children watch at your own discretion, I guess. Also, we're trying to build a fun and supportive community of people who can share their ideas and hobbies without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So to summarize, be nice or bug off.
We need a quick tech break.
Oh shit.
I'm not sure why. Well, I think because of our question thing is busted.
But we have 3 people watching right now. How dare we do this to our viewers?
Yeah, let me try something here.
I'm not even sure if I can whistle that. Do the Globetrotters just own that whistle? Yeah.
Hello? Is this thing on? Can you
Hey.
hear me now? Hello? Hello?
Echo.
That joke? Too
Echo,
soon?
Echo.
Oh, man. Hey, guys. I hope you're still sticking around. Sorry for the interruption. We had some technical difficulties. Oh, that's Alan says the reason we had technical difficulties is because we forgot about him.
Didn't forget about him. I was just pushing his buttons, and I pushed the wrong ones, apparently.
Let's get into things. Alex and chat, what were your first thoughts of the book?
Well, I went into this with some fairly high expectations just because I love like all things mythology in general, and I've always been fascinated by like Mayan mythology and things like that. And I got that, but I guess I was just expecting more. It wasn't like it was okay, but I was just left wanting more in a lot of parts of it. Like so my initial impressions were like, okay, so it's got a slow start, maybe it'll pick up, and I don't know that it ever really did. um, uh, I did like some of the characters in how they were designed, and I think my favorite part were probably the descriptions of the places that they went, you know, but everything else just kind of felt like when the setting is your favorite in a book, it kind of says a lot about it.
Yeah.
So what about you, Adam? What were your first thoughts?
Well, I was really excited from the get-go because it felt like there was a lot of lore, like Via Strake just said, there was a lot of lore. It felt like super real, like a really fleshed out story. It felt like something that the author really put through the ringer and went the whole 9 yards with. And I kept waiting for things to get going, and they just kind of didn't. But more on that as we progress through the night. I was really excited from the beginning to see where we could go.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point of she did a good job of creating a good foundation for the world that we were in. It's very colorful and vivid, and you can really see it. So you're just waiting, like, okay, she's setting the foundation, and then this will get going, and it's wonderful because I'll be able to see everything. And well, I think that wound up being the problem is because they're in an area with in a book with so many different settings. She wound up talking a lot about other stuff that didn't necessarily advance the plot or didn't add necessarily enough to this. Like, this is one book that I think just a lot of it suffers from issues with pacing. Like, there's so much potential there, and you want it to be great. Because there's so many elements that would lend themselves to making a great book that just never quite comes into there. And a lot of it is the lore as well. Maybe I took that a little bit for granted because it's stuff like a lot of it is stuff that I more or less knew. And it's really cool seeing these like modern mythological epics taking place. Like that, setting up that literal hero's journey where the gods use mortals as their, means of playing their infinite games.
Yeah. Let's jump to Via Strake's question. That's something that I wanted to talk about, but didn't really have a good way of approaching it. So I'm going to steal that super quick. What was the biggest miss in the book?
For me, the biggest miss was the main character. She had so much potential to be for Cassiopeia to be this great, strong character who does so much to defy expectation, not just of her but of her world, and she kind of does, but it's despite like that she's the heroine, it all feels super passive, and she felt super one-dimensional for the most part. Her
Yeah.
whole thing is like, I want to be able to do what I want. Okay. And that was it. Like she vaguely falls in love with a god throughout it, but like I've always felt romance was kind of like, despite it being its own genre, I always felt romance was an add-on to other genres. Like it's a way to add flavor to a story, not everything there is to it, and it kind of ended up being neither romance nor it not enough romance nor adventure to be one or the other, and
Yeah.
it's really frustrating because again, in this set, they set up a character who had the potential to learn a lot about herself, to grow, to be more than one dimensional, being put through all these trials, and she just never really got there for me. Like she learns a little bit, and she learns to make personal sacrifice like right at the end, but it seems to come almost out of nowhere because even the romance part isn't strong enough to compel you to be like, oh yeah, that's absolutely what she had to do in that situation. um and I get that her final wish was not for that, but it was what compelled her to walk down the road, and when she finally gets to the end, she's like, oh, I realize I need to think bigger than myself. But again, where the fuck did it come from? Like it didn't feel earned, and it was so frustrating because there was so much, like there were little pieces there that could have built into something great, and it was still a good story. It's just missing something, and that was the biggest miss for me, you know.
So the for me the missing thing was the why. So obviously Unkame had a big why he wanted his throne back. But all of those subtle whys, like why did what's her name?
Cassiopeia?
Cassiopeia, why did she love Unkame?
Yeah.
Why did the creatures that they interacted with give Unkame his body parts back? Why did his brother not just kill him outright from the get-go? There was there's so many things missing with like a passionate reason to do stuff.
Exactly. Like what's compelling them to actually make these hard choices beyond, this again, that desire for freedom. And I think you did a good job of summarizing why she was my biggest disappointment is like you said, you're missing the why, and that applies to really all the characters. And a part of what facilitated that, I'm with V.S. Drake on this one, is the dialogue was just, there was no real tension built at any point other than maybe the stuff with Martine in the beginning, and that tension is mostly, it's like, this kid's a dick. That was like, um
The other thing I had a problem with in this is there was no escalation through the book.
right.
A book like this needs escalation. It's a book where you start small and end big. And they started kind of middle, like, oh, I got to get my body parts back so I can fuck shit up. And then nothing. It just stayed there the
Yeah.
rest of the book.
Yeah, there were no waves. It was just like, I mean, I think it's like it would be like going out with a surfboard intending to surf and you end up paddleboarding instead because there's like, it's just flat. Like it's still like, it's not a bad time. It's just not what you wanted out of it. And
Yeah. All right, let's take V.S. Drake's suggestion once more and talk about what did the author do well.
So I think I talked about it a little bit. Like one of the things I personally really enjoyed that she set up, I know we've talked about lore, but I thought she did a really good job of like really immersing you in any place that she took you. Like it was really cool to see what Mexico was like back at, in the early 1900s, like knowing that there are trends from America trickling in and there are parts of it that are thriving. We're not seeing something that's filtered through news, which tends to be negative, or that are set up specifically for tourists. We're getting kind of like a native's eye view of different parts of Mexico in an era that we just don't know about. And it was really cool to sit there and be in that with her. And she also did a great job of making the more mythological parts easy to be, like easy to imagine. And it was really nice to feel like I could like I could build that world in my head and feel like I got it accurately and not have to like fill in any gaps. And I thought she did an excellent job of that.
Yeah, I would say for me, um, she did a phenomenal job with backstory and setting scenes. Um, even comparing to like Sanderson here, which this is going to be high praise for those of you who don't know me. When you make a fictional setting in what's supposed to be somewhat realistically our world, like there's always to me that aspect that makes it feel not real. Like something stands out where it's like, oh yeah, this is cool, but I can tell this is a fantasy world.
Mhm.
Even Sanderson, like his his backstory has great depth and his immersion is phenomenal. But when I'm reading a Sanderson book, it's, I can very well feel that it's a fantasy world, where in Gods of Jade and Shadow, I really didn't feel like this was a fantasy world. This felt like something that could, in theory, actually be a belief that exists in our world. It felt like something that was being pulled from historical beliefs that exist in this world. And to be able to pull that off is awesome.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I've only read a couple other books that do something similar with historical fiction to that degree, and I completely agree that she really helps you just accept it as reality rather than, like you said, just making it a fantasy world. It was a part of our world and could realistically exist. So you don't spend time with the butts. With one T for all of you out there. Mine's out of the gutter, please. V.S. Drake, though, says that he thought that she did a great job with the gods and the lore and how the gods came to be. I would completely agree. It was really cool to hear these stories. Like I've read about mine um mythology before, but it was always like very academic, and it was really cool to hear it as stories, like actual stories, and how it might be a telling from Mayan culture, which is part of like how it helps you accept gods being in our realm. Is that these stories are very easy to just just fit in as a part of reality because it was basically a story that was a statement of fact. They treat it's an oral history that was finally written down. And it's very different from like reading an academic text, and that part was really nice, and I really enjoyed that part as well. All right. So We did talk. I know I talked a bit about how my biggest disappointment was the main character, but let's see if anybody else has any favorite characters out there and why.
What was the cousin's name?
Martine?
Martine. My favorite character was Martine. Because I felt like I could relate with him, as bad as that is. Because I feel like he just had a view of the world that was
Dude, you've got to really do some work to save yourself here. Hold up,
I
yes,
feel
Drake.
like,
Let's give him a chance to explain it.
okay, Martine saw himself as not a villain. He saw himself as a victim of his sister's desire to spite him. Obviously, that was because he was a big dick, but he didn't see himself as a dick. He saw himself as somebody who deserves to be treated in a certain way and wasn't being treated that way. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people, not to his extent, but a lot of people experience, where they think they're in the right because they hold a certain belief, and to them that belief means this one thing, but to somebody else who doesn't hold that certain belief, that means that they're being a dick. To get kind of, I mean, we won't go into this, but a good example is politics, Republicans versus Democrats. Like, each think they're right and the other's wrong, right?
True, but there's some objectiveness to this. Now, he is relatable in that sense because I think we've all been in that situation where we thought we were the hero of our own story when we really were just dicks. But I think it's really hard for that to be justified because if you so I can't refute opinion. If he's your favorite character, he's your favorite character. But
Let me clarify. I don't like him, but he's my favorite character. because
okay, so that says a lot
because
about the
he's
characters, huh?
because he's realistic.
Okay, so okay. um, I can kind of see that. Um, I personally hated his guts, and he was not even nearly my favorite character. He was, I will admit, more fleshed out than the main character, which was kind of sad. Um, like he actually has a transformation. I mean, I get he has a few chapters that are from his point of view, but he's not the main character. And yeah, she did she did give him kind of a Draco Malfoy at the very end. Like where he just kind of pulls off a transformation. But you know, and I think that was actually the one point where I actually felt that Cassiopeia lived up to her role as like the main character is when he tries to apologize and she's like, okay, but I still don't want to be around you. Like, you know, like I'll give it time, but you know, I need my space. And that was like legitimate growth is that she was not just like, I'm going to run away because there's nothing. And his change seemed to be for her sake to be able to do that, but his was still more complete, which again is sad. Um, when your transformation of your like dickish side character or secondary character is greater than that of your main character. But any whoozle, uh,
who is yours? And via
for
Strake, do
me,
you have one too?
Oh, fuck. That was hard. Um, Honestly, I liked Lorray, the demon. Because he was the only in an otherwise what I would consider relatively bland set of characters, he was the only one who really popped and had a real personality. Yeah, Lorray was the demon, the one with the crow on his shoulder. Like those were the only characters that like really had any like real personality to them. You know, Martin was a dick because he was emotionally abused by a
Chaotic nature.
grandfather and isolated, and and he played into the worst aspects of himself. The grandfather was a dick because he was just straight up an asshole. Um, and oh, the God of Storms was a good one too, but I think the God of Storms was I'm trying to remember the name of that one. Do you remember?
Negatory.
Let's see here. Hold on. It's so hard because there's so many like names in this that are traditional, like more like Mayan names, and it is really genuinely hard to place them. So I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Anywho, the God of Storm was fun because I felt like that was one of the few parts in the book where there was some like legitimate tension. Is and I'm not sure if it was so much the character as yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Juan. I remember traditional names, and it's the one that isn't. Juan, the one who wanders around.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us for the 800s. That's it. We've
we have
reached.
hit a peak. We have hit a peak of terrible dad jokes, and we are out of here.
That was the last one we could take, so that was it.
Oh man. Yeah. So retrieving the I think Juan had the ear correct that they were retrieving, if I remember.
I forget.
Yeah, anyway, so when they were trying to find the ear, again, that was the one time that I felt in the book pace kind of picked up a little bit. And I was really hoping that's where it would take off. And I don't know if it was so much the character for me personally as it was the pace picked up when that character was around, just a smidge. And that's where I give my edge to Lorray because he was just like legitimately the character was fun to read. And it was probably the only one that I found legitimately fun to read just for the character. That's why he was my favorite.
Cool. Characters. They're neat. Yes.
Solid transition work there. I was trying to lob up a suggestion, but okay. So, what did you think of what was your let's go with this then. What since it seems that the consensus is the settings are probably more the consensus is that the more engaging part of this story was the settings. What was your favorite setting? Like throughout the book?
I really liked the road. I feel like that's too much of an obvious choice. The road in
The Black Road in Jibalba?
yeah.
Zibalba?
Yeah. The Black Road in is that what it's called?
Zibalba. Yeah, it's spelled with an X, but I think it's Zibalba. It's
Zibalba. Zibaba. Something like that. Okay.
Zibalba.
Anyway, that road I thought was really cool. I liked the aspect of time and space don't flow the same there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you step off the road, you're totally fucked. I liked how I felt like I could very clearly imagine, like in my mind, I could imagine it very well. And it was somewhere that was exactly how it should be, right? It was super dark and dismal and a place of no hope. You know, everything about it was hopeless. Like, oh, I've walked for an hour and I've gained a step. I don't know where to go. Nobody here is going to help me except for the random snakes. You know, everything thematically fit. I was really pleased with that part. And it also had some of the escalation that I felt that was missing from the book.
Yeah, that would probably be the tie for my favorite. For setting wise, I really liked the description of Mexico City because it was kind of cool to see like. I think I got like a real, the best look at like what Mexican culture was like at that time, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, the temp, uh, and it's just something I've never read before, and it was presumably from somebody who is native to the country, and to see that country from their eyes. We don't get a lot of that in fiction because of the nature of the beast, or at least not as much for Mexico, which is part of the reason why we're doing this series on you know Latinx authors, is so that we can get that. And like that scene right there is where I really got the most of that for the real world. But I would have to tie it with the Black Road of Zubalba, because I think that's the part where we get all this lore build up in the very beginning, and yeah, we get pieces of it throughout as we go, but it really does culminate in the Black Road, and that's probably the most satisfying part, is that we get to really see the lore in action. Like there's the lore, and then there is what actually exists, within the world of the book. And those were, seeing that in action, like you said, is probably one of the more satisfying ones. But other than that, I would have to say Mexico City. As much as Larray had life breathed into the character, I think Mexico City had the most life breathed into the setting itself, and at least as far as reality is concerned, like actual reality. And that was why I really enjoyed it. Plus she got to talk to ghosts. Oh, that's interesting. V.S. Drake liked the temple or casino part near the end. I'm wondering, is that because is it because of the conflict, or is it because of the setting, V.S. Drake, on that one? And while you answer that, why don't we move on to the prompt that V.S. Drake laid out for us? Which do you think was the better quality of historical fiction, The Alchemist or Gods of Jade and Shadow?
I think it's tough. Gods of Jade and Shadow did a really good job for laying out the foundation, like we talked about. The Alchemist had a much more a larger knack for flowing a story. Now I think I'll land on The Alchemist because I feel like it laid out some cool historical stuff as well as Gods of Jade and Shadow. And I think just the fact that it flowed a lot better than Gods of Jade and Shadow would probably put it ahead for me.
I personally am going to land on overall historical fiction quality. I'm going to land with The Alchemist. A large part of it, as you said, Adam, is the flow story is that I think vastly better paced. Even it, in part because it was a smaller book, but it just flows better, and it's meant to be it's not meant to be like an action thriller, but it sets that tone from the beginning, whereas this book, when you have gods that literally hacked each other to pieces, like at the beginning of your story, you kind of are setting that up to be something a little more forceful in the way the story moves, or at least have a better pace to it. And uh you know it just sets you up for something that never comes through, and that's tough to deal with as a reader sometimes. uh the Alchemist, it knew what it was from the beginning, and it sets that tone and it keeps it throughout, and that just it sits better and it hits enough realistic history to be great. But the thing is that it leans into very distinctly. Oh, well, it looks like VS Drake said it for me. The Alchemist was fantastical enough for me to remember it was fiction, and that's absolutely true. Whereas, and I think that is probably one of the most uniquely awesome things that this book does is that it doesn't, it's fiction, but like you don't remember that it's fiction until really it's the beginning and end, you know, and that's a unique thing that I've rarely seen in books, but I don't think it's enough to overcome the things that it's lacking in the story to make it better than The Alchemist. You
Yeah.
know, by the way, I'm fine with doing an occasional comparison when there is a direct link by this, but just I don't want to set a precedent of us constantly comparing books like one to another, like immediately. Like this was a good one, VS Drake. Thank you, because there is a very specific link between them, and we were discussing that. I just don't want that to get out of hand where we start being like, "What's your favorite book?" and then we start talking about other books other than the one that we're talking about. So I just want to set that precedent as tread carefully with that particular kind of topic. If you
Cool.
Do you agree there, Adam, or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, if a conversation naturally takes us away from the book for a minute, I think it's okay, but we definitely should stay on the book of the night as
Okay.
much as possible. So
All right. As long as we're on the same page there. I just I just realized I was setting that out, and I just like, oh, I didn't consult my co-host. Who the fuck
eh,
am I?
so long as you don't make any rules like people named Adam can't participate or anything like that, you do whatever you want.
People with the last name starting with S.
Oh man.
Or that have an S in it. Eliminate half the world. Anywho, but I'm glad that we did talk about that though, because I think we needed a little comparison to really highlight, you know, how this book fit as a historical fiction type of thing, because it does lean, and they both lean fantasy, which is the neat thing, because a lot of historical fiction, uh, doesn't necessarily do that. You
Yeah.
know, um, right. So I know I've kind of touched on this topic a little bit, but what did you think of the romance between Cassiopeia and
Yeah,
Rinkume?
let's go with that. I can knock my answer out real quick with that. It was flat, one-sided, and lacked depth. There was no reason either of them should have fallen for each other.
Wow, that is super concise. uh, Yeah, I would honestly have to agree for the most part. Especially with the, I don't know that it was one-sided necessarily, but it was definitely flat, and I don't know, like it felt like something that could have been taken out of the story, and I wouldn't have missed it at all. It didn't add anything um, other than a moderate YA feel to the book. Um, although one of although one of the things that I'm not sure, I think one of the things that made it so difficult for me to actually pay attention to it though is I spent a lot of my time thinking about why is she like treating him like a regular, like why is she treating him like a regular person when she knows he's a god, and on top of that it's a god that completely destroys like her faith, and yet she hangs on to both him as a person and she hangs on to her faith at the same time. And I was just like, you aren't questioning either of these things at all. And I think that's one of the reasons again that I wound up being disappointed in her as a main character. She doesn't question any of this stuff, and it made her feel way too passive. And when romance is supposed to add depth and flavor, it's, if it even needs to be in there at all. And it was one of those things that for me, honestly, like there's ways it could have been made to work. It just didn't. And
See, so at one point she even equates Hunkame to her cousin, saying like the way her cousin treats her is the way Hunkame treated his brother. And then she goes around and falls in love with him.
right.
Like, I don't know. I felt like, so the reason why I said it is one-sided is because I felt like the only change happening was in Cassiopeia. Like she was the only one putting forth the effort. He was just kind of there, and kind of trying to keep her from leaving and treating her like I'm treating you nice because I feel bad because I'm essentially torturing you in every city we go to.
That's a fair assessment, and that honestly, and the fact that that's portrayed as a romance felt a little like it's even portrayed as romance. I wonder if that was an attempt by the author to make it seem like this is what like somebody who doesn't know what love is experiences love. Like, is that supposed to be Cassiopeia's recollection of it, or was that just like an on you like, or is that a mistake with the building of the romance? Um, I do agree with V.S. Drake that I think he fell for more as he became more human. Like they have that moment where the most human he was when he was giving up his heart, and that was that's something that could have been a very powerful scene if it had built up anything else and hadn't been undermining their romance with the stuff that you just mentioned, Adam, the entire rest of the way. Yep, exactly. Yesterday, most of the way it's just damn, he fine. But that was a good call, a good call out there of ES Drake that the dude's brother, I think it's Vakub Kame, just outright was just called them out on their bullshit. Like this is this isn't what you think it is, like, and just straight up called them out on it, and they're just like. Like, there was really no proof of it. Like, I don't know. That was a tough one. But that does bring me to my next question is what did you think of our godly antagonist, Fukuokame?
So I liked and disliked him. I felt like his desire to rule was done well. Like I felt like that was a reasonable motivation for him. So the reason why Hunkame had to take back the throne because Vakub was going to destroy the world, essentially. I feel like that was kind of unrealistic. Like, I don't feel like he had real motivation to do that. Especially considering how it had been 50 years and he hadn't done it yet. So I liked that he felt shunted by his brother and took over. I disliked that his brother felt he had to take back the throne because of what he could potentially do with it.
A solid assessment. V.S. Drake, I like that little bit that V.S. Drake says that they think he lacked a reason to do what he did until the very end, and it could have been shown a lot earlier how bad Hunkame was to him. I agree that there was a lot more potential there to again build tension. Like there's another missed opportunity to go, because that reasoning is a really compelling one. It adds depth to a character. It's a villain that did it because he was mistreated and he thought it was his only way out. Like it was out of desperation. Like that gives depth to a character, but to toss it in at the very end without even hinting at it, prior, it's a little tough. It might have worked in a story that had better pacing up to that point, but because it was already slow and then to just toss that in there at the end, again, it just feels a bit unearned. And I wish there was more to him because there's a lot more potential than was really explored with that character. And again, we're talking about this book like it's so bad, but it's not. It's an okay book. I think all of us are just frustrated that like it had so much potential to be so much more. It had so many pieces in place and was missing a couple of crucial things and missed a few potentially great opportunities.
Yeah.
That's a good point, though, V.S. Drake, is that Vakub was a poorly formed mirror of what Cassiopeia could be, and that's something that could have been alluded to throughout the book. You've got a godlike character. It could be like that he could play on that is a character that because he is a character that does like to attack or play on people's emotions, is play more into that. And constantly he's like, I could give you the world, I could give you everything. No, play on the fact that you're similar to each other. And that creates tension. You start alluding to the fact that this character is relating to the antagonist, and that is something that you don't see a lot of, but it is really interesting and could have added a lot of depth, not only to Vakukame, but also to Cassiopeia. Yeah, and instead it's just, despite having a little bit of depth at the end, it just comes off as a bit more one-dimensional than like could be. And yeah, if that mirror was going to be turned, I think it could have been turned more often or in different ways. Like not every mirror needs to be like straight on. Like walk her through a hall of mirrors or something, Agreed, yes, Drake. It's because Cassiopeia didn't really want anything. She just wanted to not be in her situation. And like she And I think you mentioned earlier that she really had nothing to lose at any point either until the very end. And again, with the romance feeling unearned, that does, it's not really a stakes. It's not a stake that we as the readers can really identify with as easily, you know?
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The last thing she received from Hoon Kame was, what was it? Some sort of necklace with
Yeah, the jade necklace.
the jade necklace.
Or are
What
you
do you,
talking about the black pearls?
the black pearls? Yep. What do you think the black pearls meant from Hoon Kame? Something, nothing.
I mean,
Was
they
it?
obviously meant something, but I had a really tough time figuring that one out. Like at one point, I thought that because black pearls aren't like jet black, they're like a grayish black, and I partially at least thought that maybe this is alluding to the Black Road or alluding to that little piece of his heart that's left over at the end. And I wasn't really sure because like the black pearls never really stood out. I do know that like the Caribbean and the Yucatan are known for like pearl diving and stuff, but like it's such a stretch. um uh I really honestly am not sure. I thought like honestly when I read that and because I both read this like read a physical copy and listened to it when I read that, I was listening to it the second time, thinking that I'd missed it. I'm like, no, I don't think so. Um, Maybe Vs Drake's right that it could be just something that everyone wants, but or means to allow her to have her freedom, maybe. But again, why black pearls? Like, why that specifically? Because it's such a weirdly specific thing to give. Why not gold? Why not jade? Things that we like have a known value or.
So I think
Oh,
that's
that's a
the
good
thing
point.
is I think the black pearls is supposed to be like how, we give red roses to people, right? It's just a generic go-to gift kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had a take on what it meant. I kind of wanted to get the feel if you guys felt the same, but I'm guessing not. Uh, so they talked about Cassiopeia getting black pearls before, while Hunkame was mostly human. And she never came right out and said it, I don't think, but she thought about how she didn't want black pearls. She didn't want something so stupid. She just wanted him. And I think that he knew that when he was human, when he was fully human at the end, he understood that. And I think the fact that he gave the black pearls to her anyway after transforming fully back into God mode was supposed to signal to her that he had no feelings for her anymore.
That's a good insight. I don't know that's necessarily there's like no more feelings, but I think it does absolutely, at the very least, mark that it's his full transition to godhood, no longer human, if nothing else. Possibly no more feelings, but it's hard to believe that when he sent Lorray to her. But like maybe it was kind of like it's time for us both to move on type of gift, you know. But like I really do like that insight. I mean, it's possible with what V.S. Drake said with the Black Pearl being a heart's desire, could be that as well. But that's another thing. Like with oh shit, yeah, left her on red. I wonder did the ellipses show up first? The
Those are the black pearls. The ...
Oh, yep, that's what they are. They're the ellipses before left on red. All right, we've solved it, boys. Mystery solved.
All right, this fucker's been typing for 20 years. What the hell is going on? Anyway.
Oh man.
Any other final topics you want to discuss?
I think unless we get something from chat, we can probably go into final thoughts.
I think it's more of a user deleted kind of situation.
And not blocked, but you're gonna come up as potential spam later. Yeah, all right. Yeah, so why don't we just move into our closing thoughts? What were yours, Adam?
Yeah. So like I said at the beginning of the night, I definitely thought each scene was set really well. I feel like the author just had a really hard time transitioning between setting a scene and getting things going in motion. The depth was missing a little bit. I really, really liked the lore aspect here. Anytime you take, an idea that somewhat exists in our world and transfer it into a fantasy setting, it's kind of cool to be like, oh yeah, what would happen if kind of things. So that part I really enjoyed, but I just felt like the story as a whole was missing a vital heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would land this one on would not suggest, but is a close call.
All right, fair assessment. My final thoughts are: this is one book that I think, and this is a pretty rare one for me, would actually significantly benefit from being turned into a movie. Just the nature of having to shorten things for a movie might give this the pace that it needs, and they can work out the kinks that are in the book and be able to do some wonderful things with it. And unfortunately, what that means is like there is something lacking in the book, and we said it throughout that this just it doesn't have the tour de force of story to carry the more wonderful elements of it, like the scenes. And I'm with Adam that this is one that I would struggle to recommend, especially because like I love, again, Mayan mythology, and I love hearing the stories of it, but there have to be better ones out there for intro to that. If you want, honestly, like I could say read like the first like 3 or 4 chapters and then like nix the rest of the book, but I don't know, this is my first one that I wouldn't necessarily like actively recommend, which is sad, but like yeah, I don't think I could actively recommend it to people unless they like ambling stories that don't really go anywhere or have earned rewards. And I just see so much potential in this author, and I want to read more from her in like later works in hopes that she produces something that fills in those gaps, because again, there is so much in there that has so much raw potential that I really like, that I'd be willing to give the author another chance, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I mean, obviously she set the story up really well. Just that's kind of where it ended.
Well, I mean, it just like not necessarily ended, but it just like you expect like a bit of a, there's highs, lows. There's got to be a climax, and there really was no climax until like the very end, and it was just like beep. And that's just like
a good way I like to think about how I felt about this book is coming up to the end. I wanted Hunkame to give up his throne and stay mortal with Cassiopeia, and when he didn't, I wasn't bummed.
Yeah. That says a lot, really, right there. Interesting note there via Drake. Mexican Gothic. I had heard about that one before. In fact, I know we tossed around that as a potential to end up on our list. I would. That's one I may have to add to my own personal list because again, I see so much potential in this author. Is like there's so many near misses. Like it's not like they were like wildly off because this is an okay book, but it sounds like with Mexican Gothic she stepped it up, and I would still recommend this author. I just wouldn't recommend this book. That's where I'll leave that. But yeah, I would. Yeah, V.S. Drake, you've been our most constant companion down this path, and this is the first one that. Yeah, I think we've all not recommended it, which I hate to do, but it is what it is. But despite that, honestly, I'm glad that we had a book like this. It had to happen at some point, and I think it shows that we're not just cherry picking our books, like we are legitimately like stretching our. Yeah, we all need hugs.
That's a good disclaimer from.
Oh yeah, thank you, DM Stable, for that.
Account.
So yeah, Mexican Gothic. It does get a little dicey for those who may have triggers regarding rape or sexual assault. Tread with caution. But you know, if that book is the next step in this author's, if it is a positive step in this author's writing, I think it probably is a great book, and who knows, maybe it'll wind up on our list eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, V.S. Drake, I think we all wanted this to be so much more, you know. It has all the, it's got so many of the makings, you know. But before we end up going in circles, oh, why don't we close it out for the night, Adam?
Yes. Let's talk about our future books. So we have, obviously, we already know about Alice by Christina Henry. That's for October 9th. I am putting that in the thingy doodad right now. And the result of our vote tonight is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson.
Ooh, that'll be an interesting one. I have seen it on many a list of some of the greatest works of horror ever written. So let's see if it lives up to the hype.
Yeah, we're getting to our horror section, right? Both of these are horror books, right?
Yep. Coming up for October, our main themes for October are going to be horror thriller books. So for a spooky October. Also, quick note: after October, our first show in November will be our 1-year anniversary show.
Yeah.
So join us for that. I do believe for November we are going back to the original recipe. Just toss out your ideas for books. We will if we don't hear anything, we'll pull from our already long list. But if you have something you really want to see us read through November, especially something for our anniversary episode, please send us your recommendations. We'd love to hear from you. And
just for an added kick too, if you want to suggest a sequel book for our second year of doing this, That would be hilarious.
But solid suggestion, Adam. So yeah, second books would be like a sequel to one of the books that we read would be an excellent way to ring in year number 2 on our show, which
Yes.
honestly I've loved doing. Thank you to everybody who's made that possible. But why don't we get into our plugs for the day?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about us, go to dmstable.com. That's where you're going to find out all the information you could possibly ever want to know about us and all the other cool things we do. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel. The link is below the video. We post these videos and some other stuff. Patreon is also below the video. You should check that out and give us money. I mean, I'm not begging, but who knows? Patreon.com/dmstable if you want a direct link. We also have some socials that you should check out. That's Facebook and Twitter. For Facebook, we are at the DMs Table, and Twitter, we are at DMs Table. There we post about books and stuff and other things. So check that out. Also, if you want to chat with us every second of the possible day of... That came out wrong. If you want to chat with us any second that you could possibly ever want to, then you should get on our Discord. How do you do that? That's a good question. You hit us up on our socials, and we'll get you the link to our Discord. On our Discord, we talk about books and other nerdy stuff. We recently added a 3D printing section. It's really hitting off. It's cool talking about 3D printing stuff and other nerd things.
Many we have a couple spoiler threads for popular shows such as Mando and Loki, and we've done games on there as well before, so lots of fun stuff to do.
We also have a thread dedicated to talking behind Alex's back, but he's hidden from that channel, so don't tell him about it. Oh, wait.
It's just, yeah, both of us co-hosts have our own shit-talking channel.
Wait, what?
Anyway, actually, again, disclaimer, we don't do that shit. Like, remember, be nice or fuck off. With that, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It was one of our more unique shows just because of the nature of the book that we read. Thank you to my friend Cassandra for the suggestion. It didn't pan out as like one that we were particularly like loved, but I do love that we are pushing our boundaries and reading things that we wouldn't necessarily have otherwise, and it's forcing us to really be like truly critical about the way we read, and that's it's not just fan service for ourselves.
Yes, thank you very much for the recommendation. I do want to say that even though none of us would recommend it, that doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means it's out of our particular tastes.
Yes.
So
thank you for the clarification there, Adam. But thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you next book.
Yes, here's mine.
Man, you've been